Welcome back. Here we are bringing you episode 3. I feel like my last couple months have been super busy because at this point in time, we only told a handful of people about this podcast. So the closer we're getting to it going live, the more excited I'm getting. We're actually really freaking close.
Yeah, we totally are close. I can't even tell you how many times I've had to catch myself from slipping up and telling people because I'm so excited about it. This is a huge project, so just ready to get it going.
I know there's been so many opportunities to do it. Hopefully by now, some of you are listening on YouTube. And if not, if you could head to our YouTube after listening and comment whether you thought we were working on something behind closed doors, if you guys know us, that'd be really cool to see if you guys noticed anything different about us lately. Thank you all again for tuning into this episode. We know you kind of know what you're getting into when tuning into a true crime podcast, but we do want to give you the trigger warning that there are some details in this case that could be a bit uncomfortable for some. So we just wanted to give you that heads up. But thank you guys again for listening, and we're going to get into it. As in all cases, we're going to start at the beginning. It's important to us that we always talk to you about who the people were that had their lives completely torn upside down due to the cruel nature of others. Today, we shine the light on Brittanee Drexel and her family. Brittanee was born in Rochester, New York on October 7th of 1991 to her parents John Keolo and Dawn. The two were never married to each other, but John, Brittanee's birth father, left both Dawn and Brittanee before Dawn gave birth to Brittanee. But Dawn was not a single mother for long. She had married Chad Drexel shortly after giving birth, and then he adopted baby Brittanee not long after. Dawn and Chad go on to have 2 more children together, Marissa and Camden. Brittanee was the oldest of the 3. Brittanee absolutely adored these 2 like any loving sister would. After Chad, her father, had finished his military stint, their family moved to Chili, New York. This is about 20 to 30 minutes from Rochester. At 17, Brittanee was a junior at Gates Chili High School in Gates, New York. Brittanee always made sure that she looked perfect. Her mother, Dawn, talked about how Brittanee would not leave the house without her hair and makeup all done, and of course her outfit perfectly put together. She was said to want to go into cosmetology and had aspirations to be a model. When she went missing, one of the concerns her parents had was if someone offered her some type of modeling gig. Brittanee was a very pretty girl. A lot of folks mention how pretty her eyes were. Brittanee was born with persistent hyperplastic primary vitreous in her right eye, so this caused her to need multiple surgeries throughout her life. Due to this, her right eye was blind, so she wore contact lenses to avoid the eye from wandering. Brittanee was always described as pretty in every article you find, and they really did make her eyes pop with color, like those contact lenses, so that really brought a different distinction to how she looked. But on the other hand, Brittanee was also a sporty type. Her sport of choice was soccer. She absolutely loved soccer, and I believe that she was said to be very good when she was on the field. John Greco was her boyfriend, who she started dating in 2006. John described his girlfriend as happy-go-lucky about life. Although they had their own troubles sometimes, as in any couple, they were a happy couple. Brittanee was always texting John on her phone. And this sounded really cute to me because they were always in contact, always telling each other what they're doing, what they're up to, that sort of thing, just always keeping communication. And I think that's really sweet.
The happy young love.
Exactly. It was 2008 when Dawn and Chad Drexel had separated. As we know, not everyone is perfect, and Brittanee had her own struggles she was dealing with. When her parents split up, it took a toll on her. Her grades began slipping, and she wasn't as dedicated to soccer as she had previously been. Along with that, a few months before Brittanee disappeared, she overdosed on 2 occasions after taking her mother's prescription medicine. So Brittanee was clearly really struggling right now. Her parents have split up, so she's probably thinking about all these new situations and what they're going to entail. On top of that, she and her boyfriend, John, they're not always having fairy tale days in their relationship, so let alone the struggles of life as a teenager and the stresses of everything else in life weighing on her. She wanted to just go live a little and forget about how crazy life was for a while. What better way to let loose a little bit and spend time with friends in Myrtle Beach in South Carolina? And that's exactly what Brittanee planned to do.
I mean, honestly, when you're young and you have the weight of the world on you, I feel like going to Myrtle Beach and thinking that, because you're 17, and when you're 17, it's at that point in your life where you're I'm almost 18. I'm pretty much an adult, right? And so, you know, especially because she already had a rough year, and like being somebody that didn't have their dad in the picture their entire life, like I can understand exactly why she probably felt super stressed out and felt like she deserved to have like this trip with her friends. So it's just a unfortunate situation that, you know, it resulted in us even having to make this story about her situation.
I know. And one of the hardest parts was for me when I found that John, Brittany's birth father, which we don't really discuss this too much because it wasn't too prominent in the case, because you guys will hear how kind of extensive this is, and there's kind of a lot of pieces to it. But John, her birth father, ended up visiting her, Brittanee. That was like a year before she ended up going to Myrtle Beach. So, you know, he's trying to build this relationship with her. But again, Brittanee was dealing with a lot. So wanting to go off and have some fun isn't, you know, it's not something I would think about twice.
Yeah, it's definitely not out of the ordinary for,
No.
you know, someone that young just kind of wanting to let loose.
Yeah, and she would, you know, as a kid, and she's the oldest right now, with school and everything weighing on her. I think she only had, yeah, she was a junior, so she had only one more year of high school to go. And that's, you know, we know once we graduate high school, it is not smooth sailing from there. Everybody wishes to be a kid again, and here she is still a kid and wanting to just enjoy life.
And I feel bad too for her dad because, you know, I'm sure a lot of guilt even piled on more after this situation happened because he wasn't around when she was young. And so, you know, he spent a whole year trying to rebuild this relationship of a lot of time missed with her. And then this happens. Anywho, we're going to go into the story. So it was in April 2009 that Brittanee decided to head to Myrtle Beach for spring break with her friends. Myrtle Beach is a popular destination for families and young college kids looking to hang out on the beach or to roam the 1.5-mile boardwalk. The strip is pretty active throughout the day, especially during that time of the year. Brittanee asked her mother, Dawn, if she could head down with her friends. Dawn said no. Her mother didn't feel Brittanee should leave town due to some hardships that she was dealing with at the time in her life. During an interview, Dawn said, quote, "I told her I just felt something was going to happen to her. I just felt it," end quote. On top of that, she didn't know any of the people that were going with Brittanee and knew that her friends were all older and didn't think that her daughter would be looked after. Naturally, Brittanee was upset that Dawn wasn't having it. When you're 17, spring break with your friends in Myrtle Beach sounds like a blast. I know for me, all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends. Over the following days, Brittanee was still upset that Dawn wouldn't budge. She was convinced that she could handle this trip, but still, Dawn said no. On April 22nd, 2009, Brittanee asked Dawn if she could spend a few days at her friend's house since her original plans of going to Myrtle Beach were shut down. Dawn agreed to let her go. After all, it was spring break. Little did Dawn know, this would be the last time she saw her daughter alive. This is when Brittanee decides to hop in a car with her friends and make the 14-hour road trip from Rochester, New York to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. When she gets to Myrtle Beach, she continues to stay in contact with Dawn and her boyfriend, John. John didn't go on the trip with Brittanee because he had work. John and Brittanee were constantly talking, though. It's kind of like that young love, constant texting relationship like we were talking about. She always had her phone out and was consistently texting him. On April 25th, Saturday, she even called her mother. Dawn said, quote, "She said she was at the beach. I didn't think anything of it because it was 80 degrees in Rochester that day, and they call the lake the beach here," end quote. So Dawn assumed that she was still in town and must be at Lake Ontario shoreline, but she was actually at the beach down in South Carolina.
You know, I'm glad that you mentioned a little bit earlier about the texting piece again, like with Brittanee and John constantly texting, because this becomes very important later on. I also kind of wanted to touch on the side of Brittanee, you know, kind of defying her parents' ruling on this and, you know, just going 14 hours without permission. I'm not a parent, so I may not be able to speak from the parental side of things, but I can't say her saying she was at the beach would throw a red flag in. because that shore Dawn believed she was at, I think is only like 20, 30 minutes away, right?
Yeah, definitely within 30 minutes. Like totally normal for her mom to not be worried about where she is because it was a pretty common place for them to go.
Right, exactly. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have been so much alarmed at first because that's a spot they frequent. I believe they typically call that the beach, if I remember reading that right.
Yeah, like that lake is so big. I'm pretty sure, like, if you were in Rochester, the other side of it is in Canada. So it's pretty big.
Oh, wow.
So later that night, Brittany left her hotel alone to return some shorts and pick up some of her belongings from a friend's hotel down the strip. They had been hanging out on the beach all day with some of their friends that traveled down separately from Rochester. Brittany was staying at the Bar Harbor Hotel, and her friend Peter Brozowitz was staying about a mile and a half down the strip at the Blue Water Resort with some of his friends. According to Peter, Brittany stayed for about 15 minutes and left back to her hotel. When Brittany left, she had texted John to let him know that she was making the walk back to her hotel. After that, she stopped texting. So this was odd to John because, like I said, she was constantly texting him. Time passes. John begins to worry more. He reaches out to the friends that she's with, and nobody has seen her. John knows something isn't right. Brittany doesn't just not respond. He knows it's time to tell her mom what's really going on. So when he makes that call, Dawn's clearly not expecting it. Dawn and Brittany's father, Chad, were both trying to get a hold of Brittany, but no answer. Dawn had a close family friend that lived closer to Myrtle Beach down in North Carolina and asked them to head over there and begin searching for her daughter. After meeting with Brittany's friends and still no trace of where she could be, Brittany was reported missing to the police and their investigation began. Could you imagine getting that call?
I couldn't even imagine, especially again because she said she was at the beach. You know, there's no red flag really yet. The phone call too, I think it was just like Dawn telling her about her cleats and stuff too, and I would say this would be terrifying. I mean, you originally think your daughter is just 30 minutes, 30 minutes away from you, not 14 hours. So now, I mean, Dawn is unraveling in just thoughts on how to get there and closer to her. Because, I mean, 14 hours is a very long time.
Absolutely.
Period. Never mind missing. Like, and again, this is where I said, like, John and Brittany texting all the time would become very important later. Like, that was the sign when she stopped texting. It was the sign that something had happened. That was where they, started that time frame of what could have gone on. But I'm glad that John did call her parents because he was scared for her. And I mean, worst thing to come out of it, she'd, get grounded, come home if everything was okay, but she'd be okay. So I'm glad that John did do that. And I mean, in the end, I wish things could have been different, but.
Absolutely. Like, imagine if he didn't, right? Like, how much more time would have passed if she wasn't in constant contact with John? If John, let's say John wasn't even her boyfriend, like, she would have been missing for probably a lot longer. Like, I just kind of wonder what her friends that she was actually there with would have done, like knowing that Brittany didn't come back to the hotel, or, because the fact that her own boyfriend had to be the one to report that she was missing to her mom, like her own friends that she was there with. I mean, I didn't see any kind of personal background on them. Clearly, her not coming back wasn't really a big deal to them. And apparently it was because they were kind of like doing their own thing over the weekend, but we'll get into that later. So
can't wait to touch on that.
Yeah. As far as the investigation goes, the Myrtle Beach Police Department began interviewing Brittany's friends that she was staying with at the Blue Harbor Hotel. Nobody knew where she was, and they weren't really concerned that she hadn't come back to the hotel yet because she left all of her belongings, and they spent a lot of time apart over the course of the weekend. John told the media, quote, "She got into a fight with her friends when she was down there, and I was telling her to just have a good time and try to enjoy the time that she had left," end quote. So it makes sense that her friends she was with weren't really concerned with Brittany's whereabouts, though on the other hand, I don't care if my friends and I are fighting. Like, if he or she went missing while we're on vacation, all that drama's behind me, and I'm like, we need to find her. I feel like her friends didn't want to get in trouble for her disappearance. even if you don't think that you know anything, though, it's extremely important to at least help with whatever information that you do have. Authorities then questioned Peter Brozowitz and his friends. After all, they were the last to see Brittanee when she picked up her things from their hotel that night. They said that she stayed for about 10 to 15 minutes and then left. The group of friends checked out later that night around 1 a.m. to head back to Rochester. So clearly this kind of looks kind of suspicious, right? Like, why are you checking out at 1 o'clock in the morning to head all the way back home? It's about 14 hours away. Like, I thought maybe they were trying to avoid traffic. Like, I've done that, you know, but still, like, just with the circumstances that are going on.
Peter leaving at 1 a.m. was definitely a little suspicious to me. I feel like you just had a night of partying. Were you already up at 1 a.m.? Or, like, did you sleep and then you left? Like, that was kind of confusing to me. But, like, you know, one of your friends are missing. So wouldn't you assume, too, you just leaving in the middle of the night wouldn't raise suspicion with police? I know in the end, you know, we know what happens in the end, some of us, and you guys will find out, too. But, I mean,
Well, I don't know if it was suspicious for them at the time, right? Because they didn't really know that she was missing until after they left. I mean,
I thought her friends looking for her.
Well, these
Okay,
are the friends. These are the friends that checked out of the hotel. Peter Brozowitz. He went there with like separate friends. So these weren't the people that she was staying with.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So she went to go see them because she had to drop off some of his belongings. I guess like she had, I think, a pair of his shorts and he had like her sandals or something. I forget what it was.
I think her friend, it's like Jenna or something, I believe she was giving the shorts back to, but they were like in a fight. I feel like when you're with a bunch of friends and you're kind of mad at somebody.
Petty.
Like, yeah, I feel like that like one is a little bit petty. Also, she's kind of younger than the rest.
Yeah.
Why was she alone? And then there was also a piece where I think it was maybe on Dr. Phil. Peter said that he offered Brittanee a ride, but then she denied it, and he was just
super defensive.
Totally okay with. Yeah, and he was like, you know, I tried to help her, sort of thing, but she didn't want it. So I mean, you know, I'm off the hook. Which, not really to speak to his person, it was just what we were reading from articles and stuff. He didn't really sound too helpful in that beginning portion. In the end, he did cooperate with police and everything, but I feel, I don't know. Just to get down to it again, leaving at 1 a.m. is just weird.
Yeah. And I think, you know, like with him being, like I said, defensive and such, like you're the last person to see her. So, of course, if you really don't know what happened to her or what her whereabouts were after she left, like naturally, you're just going to be like, I had nothing to do with it. Like, I don't know, you know. The police department began looking in Brittanee's phone records, and they were able to see where her phone was pinging after she went missing. The first ping was about an hour and a half after a video was taken on the Blue Water Resort surveillance camera showing Brittanee arriving at the hotel where Peter was staying. That was 7 miles south of Myrtle Beach. The second ping was about 2.5 hours after the surveillance video at 12 a.m. Brittanee's phone was now 50 miles south of Myrtle Beach in a town called McClellanville in Charleston County. And McClellanville is a very small town. Its population is literally like 520 people. Search parties were commenced all over Myrtle Beach area, including Santee, Charleston, and McClellanville. The search included air, water, ground, and sonar. Woods, swamp areas, beaches, alligator ponds, it was all searched. Still, there was no trace of Brittanee. Years pass, and Brittanee's family is forced to move on with their normal day-to-day. Missed holidays and birthdays were just a constant reminder of her absence. About 4 years later, in December of 2013, skeletal remains were discovered in Horry County, South Carolina, about 10 miles away from where Brittanee was last seen on surveillance video walking on Ocean Boulevard in Myrtle Beach. That's like the main strip. Because authorities found the bones in a wooded area, they believed maybe animals had been responsible for scattering them around because they seemed like they had been there for years. There have been multiple people going missing in that area since 2007, so the bones were sent to a lab for further testing. Dawn was notified of the discovered remains. Naturally, as a mother, you're dreading this call, although you've been waiting and waiting for years to get some kind of answers. Dawn considered this the next step to getting any kind of closure for her daughter. But after the bones were tested, they ended up belonging to another missing male from a different case. It wasn't until June 2016, about 7 years later, that the FBI announced that they had new information that leads them to believe that she was held against her will and killed. This is when a $25,000 reward was offered at a press conference to potentially get people to come forward with any information to aid in bringing justice to Brittanee and her family.
First of all, I want to thank all of the law enforcement that is assisting on Brittanee's case. After 7 long years of waiting and praying for the return of my daughter, we know she isn't coming home alive. Brittanee's life was stolen from her in a brutal and senseless fashion. I need your help in bringing the people responsible for her death to justice. They needed to be held accountable for taking the life of our precious young daughter. She had her whole life ahead of her. She had a lot of dreams and aspirations. They could have done this to anyone's child, but they did it to mine. So I am here now asking for your help. I know there's a mother, father, sister, brother, son, or daughter in the North Charleston County and South Georgetown County areas that has information that will help solve the murder of my daughter Brittanee. Please help us to bring these killers to justice. Help us to put them in prison where they belong for the rest of their useless lives. They will never again take one of our children away in such a brutal fashion. We need your help so we can find Brittanee's remains and bring her home to lay her to rest. And make sure that monsters like this can no longer victimize this community or kill anyone else's child.
We need your help. We need everyone's help to bring something from her home to us. We need your help. We need someone to help us. 7 years. Please help.
We just want Brittanee to know that we love her so much and that we will get her justice. Thank you.
So clearly, the authorities felt like they had enough information to confirm that Brittanee was dead. The way that her parents spoke to the public about their daughter and finding justice is heartbreaking. They're begging for more information, and I can't even begin to imagine how they felt in that moment in front of everybody. Prior to this press conference, the FBI got their first concrete lead from a jailhouse informant. His name was Taquan Brown. Taquan was an inmate at the McCormick Correctional Institution in South Carolina, and at the time of this press conference, he had been serving a 25-year sentence for an unrelated manslaughter charge. Taquan had told FBI agent Jarek Munoz that Timothy Deshawn Taylor and his father, Timothy Sean Taylor, were responsible for Brittanee's disappearance and death. When authorities looked into their background, the elder Timothy Taylor and his brother Randall Keith Taylor had previous charges for abductions or attempted abductions for different women, one of which happened in the Myrtle Beach area in 2010, though those cases were dropped. Basically, this family has a history of different crimes against young women. Brown told Agent Munoz that at the time that this was happening, he didn't know who Brittanee was until he saw her face on the news and everything just added up. During a federal detention hearing, Agent Munoz testified that Taquan Brown told authorities that in 2009, he saw 16-year-old Timothy Taylor raping Brittanee Drexel along with 8 to 12 other men at a stash house. He claims that they were taking turns sexually assaulting her. For those of you that don't know what a stash house is, it's like a house where you keep drugs and money, kind of like a trap house. During this visit, Brown says he witnessed Brittanee attempting to escape. He had been in the front yard talking to Timothy Taylor when Brittanee came running outside and was recaptured by 4 men who pistol whipped her with a gun and dragged her back in the house. That's when Brown heard 2 gunshots and assumed that Brittanee was being killed. As Brown was leaving, he saw what looked like a dead body wrapped in a rolled up carpet being loaded into the back of a truck and driving away. Though Brown can't confirm that this was her from the events that took place, he could only assume that they were disposing of a body. He and the friend that he was with left in fear that they would be accomplices to a crime. Brown's description of the stash house matched the news station reportings. They were unable to locate the friend Brown claims was with him, and the owner of the stash house is dead for other unknown reasons. Taquan Brown has filed suit against Agent Munoz and other federal officials, saying that because his name was used publicly, his reputation in jail has been ruined. He's now considered a snitch, and his life is now in danger. Brown says that Taylor has offered a bounty to anyone who kills Brown and that he's already been a victim of assault in jail. In addition to Taquan's testimony, Agent Munoz testifies that he got more details from another jail informant, which says he received his information from the younger Timothy Deshawn Taylor, claiming that Taylor had taken Brittanee from Myrtle Beach to McClellanville and pretty much advertised her to his friends and people in the area for trafficking. But once Brittanee's case started headlining in the news, Brittanee was considered high risk, so they killed her and dumped her in a pond. The informant said, quote, they ended up tricking her out with some of their friends, offering her to them and getting a human trafficking situation, end quote. So for me, I kind of questioned why they didn't really name the second informant, because Taquan filed like this lawsuit against the FBI agent for using his name, I guess, in the media. A part of me feels like it's still him talking.
I mean, if he testified that he got another jail informant, I'm wondering if it's like witness protection sort of thing. Like, since Taquan has been assaulted already, you would assume that that next jail informant could have a bounty as well. So I wonder if that's like more of a witness protection, since Taquan was already named, but this new informant wasn't. Yeah, if I had to just guess.
Yeah, I'm like, is it still him? Like, are you still giving these details? But apparently Taquan's like details is matching everything that's like in the media. So like at this point, from what I'm gathering, it seems like he could literally just be, getting his information from the media. But Timothy Deshawn Taylor was 16 years old at the time Drexel disappeared. On the day and time Taquan claimed to have seen Timothy Taylor at the McClellanville stash house, Timothy Taylor was in third period class at Lincoln High School. Several years later, in 2019, Taquan did an interview with a new reporter where Brittanee is from. In the interview, Taquan had changed his story about what happened to Brittanee. First, he told the TV station he saw Brittanee alive 3 times, not just the one time. The first instance was 2 days after she disappeared. That's when Taquan told the news reporter he saw Brittanee being sexually abused. Then he claimed he actually saw Brittanee alive again a few days later when he went back to the stash house. Taquan said Brittanee was pistol whipped and shot on the second visit. But then Taquan changed his story, saying he saw her alive a third time 5 days after the second encounter, but this time it wasn't with Timothy Taylor in McClellanville. Instead, Brown claimed the last time that he saw Brittanee was at a mobile home belonging to a family member of his nearly 100 miles away from McClellanville on a secluded dirt road near Jacksonboro. This last encounter was when Taquan told the news station he actually witnessed Brittanee being murdered. He told the reporter a man named Nate shot Drexel twice with a double-barreled shotgun. Taquan said he immediately left and didn't know what happened to Brittanee after that. No evidence or witnesses were able to verify Taquan's story or other jailhouse informant accusations. Timothy Taylor's attorney even verified that some of the people that Taquan was claiming to be a witness were in jail when Brittanee was missing.
This seems to answer your question earlier then, because if they couldn't verify Taquan's story or the other jailhouse informant accusations, like I'm wondering then how many people came forward with something and like wanted a get out of jail free card sort of thing.
Yeah. So although the Taquan claims were pretty contradictory, the FBI proceeded to go after Timothy Taylor in hopes that he would cooperate in Brittanee's case. They did this by bringing up one of Timothy's older cases he was involved in, a case that was already closed. Timothy Taylor was involved in a previous crime stemming from his role as a getaway driver in 2011 after robbing a McDonald's in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. He was at the McDonald's with two other people that held up the restaurant. According to court records, one of the other two shot the store manager. He was found guilty in the state court for this crime, but because he was cooperative with law enforcement on details, he was sentenced to only 18 months of probation. The gunman got a 25-year sentence, and the other robber got 6 years, but was later put on probation after serving 10 months. Then, in August of 2016, federal prosecutors had convinced a grand jury to indict Timothy DeShawn on that same crime because they felt that he got off too easily. Timothy DeShawn's attorney referred to this as clearly nothing but a squeeze job, based on nothing more than the statement of two jailhouse informants. He felt that this was a way to get Timothy DeShawn to cooperate with their case. Attorneys said that Timothy would have no choice but to eventually plead guilty to those charges because his guilt already had been proven earlier in his state case. When Taylor requested bond for his past case, the FBI argued that it'd be denied because now Taylor's a suspect in Brittanee's case and wasn't cooperating with the investigation. The judge ordered Taylor released on $10,000 bail, which he posted later in the day after the bond hearing. Even though Taylor was released, the FBI made it clear that they would pursue a maximum penalty of up to life in prison if Timothy didn't cooperate. Timothy DeShawn's mother, Joan Taylor, showed up at a hearing on behalf of her son to convince the court that there's no way her son could have been involved with Brittanee's case. She said Timothy DeShawn lost one of his arms in a car accident when he was only 4 years old. This required him to fight for his life at such a young age. She described her son as a hardworking young man who had matured into a good, caring person. She said he works as a mechanic and takes care of a son, a daughter, and his grandmother. She was angry that the court was trying to blame him based on someone else's word. She was stunned, saying, quote, "I want to just scream and yell," end quote. She called the inmate's story and the fact that the government is running with it craziness. The FBI was convinced that Timothy DeShawn had something to do with Brittanee's case, or at least had more information. Prosecutors were offering plea deals to Timothy DeShawn and even told him that if he didn't assist in the investigation, that they would make sure he gets the maximum sentence. Now, this is an extremely scary situation to be in. Law enforcement is using intimidation to get what they need from him. They told him if he were to take a polygraph test and passed it, they would get him a lighter sentence. Polygraph tests are not generally admissible as evidence in court. Both the U.S. and Supreme Court have ruled lie detector tests unreliable in terms of accuracy. The judge can allow the polygraph only if both attorneys agree to do so prior to the test results being entered into court. Timothy declined the initial plea offer, but in August of 2016, he voluntarily took a polygraph test. The results were inconclusive, but the federal prosecutors were still caught up in the fact that Timothy had shown deception throughout the test, even when he had to answer his own name.
Okay, so I have a lot of opinions when it comes to polygraphs. One, like you said, they're admissible from court. So in my opinion, they seem more like a scare tactic. So here you are with a piece of equipment, right? You're sitting down with maybe a lawyer or whoever, the test administrator and everything. And it's a very scary situation. If you put me on a lie detector test right now, just for fun, I probably wouldn't comfortably get my own name right either. Like, I'm like an anxiety-ridden person as it is, so I probably would never pass a polygraph test. But I feel like, you can't even hold weight to them because they don't really prove anything. And then I also question, what exactly does inconclusive mean? Is it because you weren't getting the results you were looking for? Or was it just thrown off immediately once he didn't answer his own name in a comfortable way for the test? That part confuses me.
Yeah, well, he initially declined it. Like, he didn't even want to do it. And so, he's frustrated. Emotions are flying. So obviously that has something to do with how these things are read, right?
Right.
So in June of 2017, as part of Timothy DeShawn's plea bargain negotiations, he took another polygraph test. He was asked questions including, do you know for sure who was involved in the disappearance of Brittanee Drexel? And did you ever see Brittanee Drexel in person? Court documents show that Timothy answered no to both questions, but the FBI told him that he was being deceptive. FBI agent Weisenhofer stated, quote, Taylor was told that he was strongly reacting to several of the questions. Taylor responded by invoking his right to speak with his attorney, who was outside the lobby. After extensive discussions with his attorney, Taylor agreed to continue the interview with the examiner. During this portion of the interview, Taylor went back to the story he had previously told about the argument he overheard concerning when Redacted was accused of having Drexel's cell phone. So obviously there was a name there, but it was redacted from the court records. Within minutes of renewing the interview, Taylor denied that he was withholding any information in the missing persons case, began shouting angrily at the examiner, and asked to speak with his attorney again. The interview was terminated at that point, end quote. 5 days later, the polygraph was reviewed by a polygraph operator and noted no deficiencies. Because of this failed polygraph test, the FBI was convinced that Timothy Taylor had direct involvement in Drexel's disappearance. So kind of like what we were talking about, you know, he's frustrated. Emotions are heightened. And so just based on this conversation alone and what this FBI agent said, it's kind of like, is this really admissible? It just didn't seem very fluid in my opinion.
So when it comes to, detectives and everything like that, I've always heard that you go where the evidence takes you, but a polygraph test, I feel like, should not be something that you hold onto for dear life. Because again, you can't use it in court. There's no weight to it, really. I don't see how the FBI could be convinced that it's him. Like, his story's never changed, but the informants always did.
Exactly. Such a good point. I mean, it's also like, it's been how many years now? Investigators are desperate, right? This is the only kind of lead that they have in bringing any kind of justice to this family. And it's not right. I mean, obviously you want to get the right person. And Timothy was just, his story never changed, like you said. And the only people's story that are changing here is the jailhouse informants.
Yeah.
Will those people get in trouble for leading them down this road? Because now we're so invested in this situation that it's taking away from who really did it, if there really is somebody else that did it, Well,
I think that's why people in jail try to connect themselves to a case, or as if they knew anything about the case so that they can get out. So I wonder if maybe the informants thought if they knew Taylor and knew about his background, then, maybe he could have something to do with it and I could get out of jail. I mean, we see it a lot. We see a lot of wrongful convictions. We see a lot of false confessions and everything like that. And I think that, when you're in jail, you try to get out in any way that you can. So I guess, making up this story, not caring about anybody else's life and what you're doing to it matters.
They're also desperate. Right? They want to get out of jail. Prior to these questions, FBI agents and Timothy DeShawn discussed statements he had made the prior year, saying he had once heard two individuals argue when one of the individuals was accused of having Brittanee's phone. The names for these people were redacted from the court documents, like I said. Timothy said the two individuals never shared with him that they had been involved in any way with Brittanee's disappearance, but Timothy told investigators at the time that he found this conversation suspicious. As the polygraph continued, Timothy Taylor increasingly got frustrated and stormed out of the polygraph test before it was completed. The results of the second lie detector test left the FBI to recommend a sentence between 10 to 20 years of Timothy on the armed robbery case he was involved in 2011. Time passed to 2019, and Timothy's attorney attempted to have the federal charges dismissed, arguing that a second prosecution violated his rights. The case was put on hold for double jeopardy, but this act didn't apply to Timothy's case because he was tried by the state and the federal government. Timothy's case moved forward, and a judge sentenced Timothy to 3 years of probation on one federal armed robbery charge. Finally, the case was closed in December 2021. Taylor was never charged in connection to Brittanee's case. He held his ground and continued to keep his story that he had zero involvement with her death or disappearance. Through his attorney, Timothy DeShawn released a statement saying, quote, "I had no involvement with anything to do with Brittanee Drexel. I don't know Taquan Brown, and I don't know why he would call my name. I'm being prosecuted again for a crime I already helped them solve and already did my time for, all because some guy in prison is trying to cut a deal. It's not fair to be charged for the same crime twice, and that's not how our system is supposed to work." End quote. So at this point, Timothy DeShawn's really sticking to his word that he had nothing to do with this case. Investigators said that they continue to have a person of interest, but were still unable to find any hard evidence that Timothy was actually involved. In December of 2019, Timothy DeShawn was released from prison and given 3 years probation.
How many years was it that Timothy was being questioned? Like, how long did they have him as a suspect?
They started questioning him, I want to say, in 2016. So it was a solid 3 years of them chasing him down.
My goodness.
I mean,
so
his
3 years.
His polygraph test was in 2016.
Okay,
The first
so 3
one.
years.
Yeah.
3 years, at least 3 polygraphs.
Yeah, I don't understand, honestly, how 3 years had gone by. And Timothy didn't change his story at all. So are they hoping that he just agrees that he did it? I mean, I know him and his family had a history of the trafficking and stuff. And maybe with how small the population was where they lived, it had to be them to the FBI. It had to be there. There was a lot of information that was provided that just made sense with their story. I wonder if it was a bigger city, maybe they would have eased up on him a little bit sooner. This whole situation just goes to show how scary our justice system is, because let's say it wasn't Timothy DeShawn, it could have been somebody else that was easily influenced to just take the blame for it because they don't want to deal with this for 3 years. Having this case shoved down your throat, being told that you did something that you didn't do. Timothy DeShawn had to be super strong and adamant that he had nothing to do with this girl missing, especially with his background.
Yeah, I think it's super aggravating to me because, I mean, one, for the jail informant to just throw Timothy's name out there is just so disrespectful. Again, he had nothing to do with it. So here he is with his name dragged through the mud for years. He's tried for a different crime twice.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you want to pin him for Brittanee? That's what doesn't make sense to me. You're trying to put so much pressure on somebody that is telling you the truth and you're just not believing it because you want an answer. I don't know. It's kind of confusing to me that we spent so many years on that one person when there was no evidence or anything. And then I'm wondering if he did confess, is that all they would want from him, even having no evidence, that he wouldn't be able to point out a body? That just,
yeah,
I don't know. Knowing what we know at the end here, it's kind of, again, it's a little annoying to me.
Oh,
how did you feel about the polygraph?
I also feel the polygraphs are more of a intimidation tactic for sure. I mean, it's scary. Someone says that you're going to get a lie detector put on you. And how do you know that any of the questions that he was answering could have related to somebody else that his family was involved in, stealing or kidnapping? But I definitely don't feel like it's admissible evidence. I mean, like I said, if the attorneys agree to use it in the court, then they both have to agree upon it in order for it to be provided. I mean, if I were an attorney, and I mean, for most of the attorneys that I've ever worked for in my career, lie detector tests are trash. And honestly, it's mainly used for supporting people that don't have enough evidence, or that's all that they have, is what I'm trying to say. Like, they don't really have anything else to provide other than somebody's word. And if it ends up in their favor, then of course they want to use it. But I mean, he already had, if they didn't ask him questions such as your name, like they asked him his name and he had issues with answering his name and it being, what's the other word I'm looking for?
Inconclusive.
Yeah, inconclusive. Let's say that he answered all these questions and, like, oh, what's your name? How old are you? All of these things. And they were like going correctly. And then, you know what I mean? That would be one thing. But like his name was wrong. Like he knows his name. So that alone shows that polygraph tests, they shouldn't even be a factor, is what I'm saying, like at all. It shouldn't even be an option, in my opinion. Because then it leads you down this whole rabbit hole of possibilities. It's like the what ifs, right?
It was on May 4th of 2022 that 62-year-old Raymond Douglas Moody was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice and was held on $100,000 bail. This charge was unrelated to Brittanee originally. During this time, he was in police custody. He confessed to Brittanee's murder and told them the location of her remains, which they found on May 11th of 2022 in a wooded area of Georgetown City, South Carolina. Due to this confession, his $100,000 bail was revoked. On May 16th, 2022, Georgetown County Sheriff Carter Weaver announced the remains found on May 11th were identified through dental records as Brittanee Drexel. Moody was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and first-degree criminal sexual misconduct. This was all alleged to have happened on the day she disappeared. They couldn't quite confirm how exactly Brittanee did die, but it was suspected that Moody strangled her. Moody has been a person of interest since 2012. They have visited his home in South Carolina, where they searched it and used luminol, but were unable to find anything at the time. So Angie is going to give you the deep dive as to who Moody is, his involvement in this case, and more.
So here we are, 13 years later. Raymond Moody, a registered adult Tier 3 sex offender who was convicted for rape and kidnapping back in 1983 in California, was arrested in Georgetown, South Carolina. While authorities didn't have anything to immediately charge him for Brittanee's case, they knew they needed to get him behind bars for an obstruction of justice charge dated April 25th, 2009. His bond was set to $100,000 at the detention center. The Democrat and Chronicle newspaper reported that Moody, quote, was stopped by police for a traffic violation in a beach town near Myrtle Beach one day after the teen disappeared, end quote. That, plus his background as a sex offender, helped make him a person of interest in Drexel's case. Once he was behind bars, Moody confessed to the murder of Brittanee Drexel, and he led the investigators to where her body had been buried 13 years ago. It was just 2.5 miles from where he was living. Like we mentioned, her remains had been identified by dental records and DNA testing. Moody had been previously investigated in August of 2011 at his motel room at Sunset Lodge, where he was staying around the time of Brittanee's disappearance. Investigators removed several bags of evidence, but never identified him as a suspect. The same motel room was only 8 miles from where Brittanee's phone last pinged, 50 miles from Myrtle Beach. In February of 2012, Moody was named a person of interest in Brittanee's disappearance. 2012 is also when the FBI's testimony outlined that investigators believed she had been taken to a stash house in the McClellanville area by Timothy Deshaun Taylor. But after that lead died out, they revisited the ex-con Raymond Moody as a suspect. So let's talk about this guy's background, because if you aren't mad now, you're about to be. I also wanted to give you a trigger warning right about now for the explicit details that we're about to head into. I'll be touching on an interview that was held by one of Moody's victims from a few decades ago, but the way she opens up about her interaction with him is extremely gruesome. Moody was sent to California State Prison Solano on December 15th of 1983. He was ordered to serve a 42-year sentence for sodomy of a child under the age of 14 while inflicting great bodily injury and rape with force and threat of violence. This wasn't just one girl. This was 7 girls, all under the age of 14. And because of good behavior, whatever that means in prison, I guess, he was released in 2004 after serving only 21 years of his entire sentence.
Okay, so usually when a ball like this is dropped, I can't help but go off. So every time I get into this part, I cannot stay calm. This fact absolutely baffles me to no end. So, Angie, you and I talked about this before we even recorded, and this whole good behavior thing doesn't even make sense to me because, of course, he's going to have quote unquote good behavior in prison because there's no child in there for him to
recommit.
Yeah, when you recommit the same crime, there's no child in there for him to potentially not have good behavior around. So for him to just be released when only half of his sentence was finished just doesn't make any sense to me, and it honestly pisses me off because all this could have been avoided if he was in jail.
Well, it's ridiculous because there's nothing that I'm mad too. Trust me, I'm pissed because there's nothing that you can tell me that makes this okay for a guy to get released half of his sentence early. There's 7 girls. These are 7 families, 7 children that have had their lives ruined because of this sick person. Like, and yeah, we did talk about that. Like, of course he didn't have any bad behavior in prison. There was no little girls for him to rape. And it makes me wonder, like, you know, obviously this is just one person. There are so many people in the world that are sick like this, that have these awful thoughts in their head that actually act on them. And it's so stupid to me that we have to, it just pisses me off that someone has to die in order for there to be the kind of conviction that there should be, even if these people were hurt. Like, this part going into this whole thing, I'm like literally fired up inside. It makes me so angry.
Exactly. That's how I feel. Like, it took, so 7 girls were at minimum assaulted, and he gets put in jail for 40 years, comes out in 20 to then murder somebody. And that's finally when we're like, okay, he's a monster. So like the lives of those 7 girls that he completely destroyed meant nothing. Like, yeah.
They have to live with that for the rest of their lives.
So one thing about Moody and his situation was he was fined at some point after his release from prison. He was fined $250 because he didn't register as a sex offender. And I think this was like a few years afterwards. So my question is, like, when you get released, maybe I'm wrong, but did he have like a probation officer? Like, is their job maybe to make sure that these people register before they leave? Like, maybe before release, there's like a room with computers or some shit, and you just, I don't know, sign up that you're a level 3 offender. Like, how do you just let somebody wander around in the world without them being classified as a reoccurring offender?
And why is the fee $250? Like, that's less than my car payment. $250 because you, as a adult 3 sexual offender, didn't register. Like, you literally go in, that's the bare minimum of what you can do, sir. And it's $250 for your fine. Like, you should automatically be put back in jail or something like that.
I agree. I completely agree. Because again, it's not just like, oh, it slipped my mind.
Yeah, because like people are buying homes or basing like their livelihood on, you know, choosing to be in a community that is safe. And because he didn't register on time, you know what I mean? Like, I would be pissed if I bought my house and I looked up Megan's Law and I saw, oh, there's no offenders in my area. And because he didn't register, that's why I think that he's not there. You know, like I think about stuff like that. And it doesn't only affect him and like the police department, it affects the people that live in that neighborhood. Like trusting that your kid could go outside and check the mail.
And that's the thing about these people. They don't care about anything or anyone but themselves. I mean, I think that's clear too. I mean, and look at everything that he's done. And he still doesn't have any source of regret, remorse, guilt, nothing. And again, for him not to register just for his convenience, and so he's not marked now. Like, you're going to have to do it eventually. This man gets away with it for 13 years because the system can't figure out a way to make sure that they register before they get released into the world full of babies and children and other women and other men and everyone else in the world. And again, he's done it at least 7 times. You release them on good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what we're thinking, to be honest. I really don't.
Oh, not at all. I think we're just both pissed off at this point. Rightfully so.
To say the least.
Absolutely. In 2015, one of Moody's victims, Carrie Harding, now 48 years old, spoke to the media. She was only 8 years old when he kidnapped her and raped her in the backseat of his car at a park in Vallejo, California. Which, honestly, I used to hang out in Vallejo. My family is from there. And so to think about just like, you know, it's a little different when it hits close to home like that, because we used to go to a park that was in the neighborhood and I would be there like around that same age by myself. So reading about this kind of just made me even more upset. She described how Moody approached her and told her not to walk across the parking lot at her school, quote, because they're working on the fence, end quote. She ignored him because she explained that she had been warned to not speak to strangers. But then she realized that he had been telling the truth about the work. She turned around, he unlocked the door and forced her inside. Carrie had told the outlet, quote, everything happened in the blink of an eye. He had me in his car and had driven away within seconds, end quote. She also described how he held her head down as he drove away. She asked him where he was taking her. He explained to her that she was too little to be out by herself and he was taking her to the police station. Instead, he drove her to a deserted site about 3 miles from her home. She continued saying that he asked her, quote, has anyone told you you have a beautiful body, end quote, and then added, quote, let's get in the back, we're going to screw, end quote. I'm fuming inside, by the way. She explained to the outlet that she didn't even know what that meant because she was so young. She didn't even know what was going to happen until it happened. How terrified this poor girl was. She convinced him to finally let her out so she could use the bathroom. This is when Carrie would escape, quote, eventually, he agreed to let me go to the bathroom, and so he opened the back door and told me to squat right next to the car while he gripped onto my hair. When I squatted down, a pool of blood came pouring out of me and just got bigger and bigger. When he saw it, he briefly let go of my hair, and I just took off running, end quote. She escaped, and a few months later, she suddenly remembered a green military sticker on his bumper that was required to get into the naval base. Carrie said, quote, the minute I remembered that sticker, the police found him and arrested him the next day, end quote. During Carrie's interview, she said, quote, I guess I just really can't wrap my brain around how he was released early. He had a 42-year sentence and he did 21 years. 21 years for raping 7 girls. He should have never been given a chance to hurt another child. That's what hurts me so deeply. Because Brittanee would still be with us today if he was kept behind bars. We need to put this monster where he belongs, in a grave. End quote.
So, when Moody was released, 21 years into his 40-year sentence, the pain Carrie had to have felt that what happened to her and 7 other girls wasn't enough for him to have to commit to those 40 years is definitely sickening. And I don't know quite much right now, but I believe in South Carolina, in Moody's situation, he is eligible for the death sentence. I can't lie that I'm not hopeful that that might be an option for him. I think this is one of those people that if you don't put away, they're going to keep committing the same crime. I mean, as we can see, he can't be trusted. This man is just a monster. And the fact that so many young girls had to struggle under what he's done to them shouldn't have been taken lightly. Thankfully, at the end of it, Moody was arrested. We finally have the suspect we've been looking for.
Yeah. I mean, when we first started talking about this case, I was shocked to see that, he was arrested recently too. I mean, we're talking within the last few months. So as far as
something unrelated.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
think about that.
As far as any updates that might come, we could add that into another episode. So if there is anything that changes, or if we get information regarding, how his case pans out, hopefully it is what we want, such as the death penalty. I hope that he gets, the sentencing that he deserves for this. I think that all of us that are listening can agree that he's a monster and he doesn't deserve to walk the same grounds that we walk. So
yeah, I can't say that he deserves a 600th chance at this point. As the episode comes to a close, we appreciate you listening to us talk to you about Brittanee and her finally closed case. It may have taken 13 years, but it goes without saying that once a case is closed, it doesn't bring the family closure. Of course, it's good the monster has been finally caught, but man, does it make me angry that this could have been avoided had he finished his original 40-year sentence. Hopefully, like we said, this one sticks for good. Thank you again so much for listening. We appreciate you so much. Don't forget to be kind and stay safe.